Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Eximius Executive conversation. We've got the team together, and today we're answering a few of your questions. One of the questions written in from one of our clients that we thought was fairly intriguing. They asked, like, what's the changes you've seen in leaders and the approach from leaders over the last 12 months? So we're going to go into a few of the observations we've seen so far, and then give some of our feedback on it, and hopefully some good value for you there. So David, what's some of the observations you've seen over the last 12 months?
Well, I'm a natural optimist, as probably you guys know, but I'm going to start with a negative. One of the things that I've seen quite recently is that leaders are sort of not really leading, which is a big problem. So they're stepping back and saying to their teams, you tell us how you want to work. Be that partly at home, all in the office, whatever it is. And then the problem is they absolutely let the cat out of the bag, and everybody wants to do something slightly different. And it's leading to sort of big problems in teams, because some people go, well, I want everybody in the office because that's how I get my buzz, and that's how we share information a lot better. We have much better meetings. Some people are like, well, I've moved further away from the office, so I don't want to ever come into the office. And others are like, well, I could do a couple of days a week. But because the people at the top have said, well, do whatever you want to do or do whatever you're comfortable with, everybody's right, but it's leading to messes in the business because everybody's getting upset. And I think one of the things that leaders need to do is think about what kind of business they want to have, what their culture is going to be, what is the best environment for them as a business, and work from that point, as opposed to telling everybody what you want, because that will lead to problems.
I mean, that's a great observation. What about you, Tom? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think Dave is absolutely right. I think you need to create some clarity, some boundaries. Otherwise, you can drive everybody mad through consultation, because the difficulty in that dialogue that David just described is that there are winners and losers, and you cannot resolve a winner and loser situation through consultation. You need some clarity. So I think, I'd pick up on that as well. I think there's a sort of lack of confidence in leadership as well, and I think as well there's people taking shortcuts to fame and fortune. For example, deploying tech. I'm concerned about cryptocurrency, not just the immediate situation in terms of the valuation, but also the broader issues. So we're not really thinking particularly broadly. I think as well, communication is nothing like the way I'd like it to be in terms of people being able to talk about difficult things. And there are a lot of wrong decisions being made, I think, because we're not having proper dialogue. So, for example, in my world, there's the UK were the largest, in fact, the second largest in the world compound semiconductor manufacturer. And if there's one thing the government should have blocked the Chinese from purchasing, was a plant in North Wales, which is actually called Silicon Glen. So those sorts of decisions where even government ministers haven't got the confidence to stand up and say, hold on a minute, this isn't right, for fear of being shot down. So I think there's a lot of leadership, there's a lot of fear actually in leaders, which I think has given rise to what David just described, sort of management by consultation, which is or leadership by consultation, which is not really a very healthy place to be. And leaders do need to define the boundaries. They do need to be clearer. They do need to drive the right behaviours. And I think that there's and again, I think this, like David just described, I'd like to think of something more positive to say, but I think that the mantras around growth and domination are absolutely predominant versus actually what's happened throughout the pandemic was the situation around profit and relationship. This real focus on relationships, and I think we've lost sight of that. And I think there's people have very much gone back to where they were before. And I've noticed my peers and people I work with, they've chucked their good habits of exercise and other things down the loo and gone very much back to where they were before. And it's almost like they're pursuing the same thing with more urgency, when in fact I think there's actually a major misalignment in it, which maybe we can talk about in some other forum, which is more around what does good look like. It's more around local, it's around less tech, it's around relationship centric, it's around reducing consumption, which are all very antithetic things, when in fact actually those are the things we need to fix the issues like sustainability, profitability, creating sustainable businesses as well, because I don't see a lot of these fintechs actually really getting to a sustainable position. And I see a lot of the retail business models which I get involved in turning around and sorting out actually driving consumption, which is almost exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. So I think there's a major misalignment, and with that misalignment there's an urgency which I don't think is very healthy.
Right. And so, I mean, some very good points there. On both of you are sort of touching sort of by almost like death by committee. I don't know if that's maybe the right way to put it. So, and it's the office, returning to the office seems to be a point we sort of touched on there. It's a tough one for people because obviously they want to look after people and be inclusive. And I think most people usually start that process with a survey, to sort of make sure everyone feels included in that. But are we sort of saying here that actually, as leaders, like if they know what's best for the business, it maybe shouldn't be so inclusive, that decision making? Like David, what's your view on that?
I think Tom hit the nail on the head earlier. I think it's about the framing of the questions, because some of the people that I've talked to and heard from, not particularly clients, but just people generally, they've asked very, very broad questions, which then will validate someone's opinion more or their stance. And so, if you say, what do you want to do? Do you want to work at home, be in the office flexibly, or be in the office all the time? You give them a very, very broad range, but you haven't given any understanding of the why or the what impact will it have on others. And I think one of the driving bits of this is that I think a lot of people have spent 18 months focused on themselves, on their health, their mental health, their physical health, their co-health, all that kind of stuff, which is good. It's not a bad thing. But now it's almost the pendulum's gone too far, and it's more, well, what do I want, as opposed to what's best for my team, what's best for the company, and what's best for the wider organization. And I've heard a few interesting comments, like people saying, well, what drove our company being really good before the pandemic was the relationships we had in the office. And then people will go, well, yeah, but I've still got those relationships, so why do I need to go into the office? But there are new people that join the company who don't know who anybody is, but that's not into somebody's thinking but I've already got my relationships, so I'm fine. It's the old, I'm all right, Jack, I'll just pull up the ladder after I've used it. And I think that's the bit that companies need to really get to, is what's the best bit for everybody out, for the wider teams, the wider organization. And it's getting people out of their own head, and not just thinking what's best for them, but what's best for the team and the wider organization. And I think that's something that is a really good point to start with. And in any survey, that doesn't mean you don't do surveys or anything like that, but in that, I would say, what made is asking questions to get people really thinking about the differences between what it's like before COVID, what it's like now, what are the things that made it good before, what are the things that have brought everybody together during COVID. So you're taking people on that journey to get to better decisions. But I think it has to come from a leadership point of this is the general direction we want the ship to go in. And then how do we take people with us? But I think if you say to people, you can do whatever you want, it's just going to polarize, and as Tom was saying, it's just winners and losers, and lots of people are going to be upset. And then you're going to fall down somewhere in the middle of it, and everyone will then be upset because nobody will think they've been listened to or right or wrong, whatever. And that's almost the worst of all worlds.
Yeah, and I think if you've got nervous people, a phase transition could work here, right? I don't think there's. I think there's a lot of people in businesses who want one rule for everyone, and that's it. And I think this is one of those scenarios where there are genuinely some people who want to stay at home because they want to stay at home. Fine. And there are some people who actually really haven't left their home for 18 months. and they're very, very nervous about return. I think one of the hardest things I think for leaders is a lot of people in a perfect world, you go, here's one rule and we're done. Thank you very much. See you on Monday. We're back doing that. I'm not sure if that world exists at the moment. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. Tom, what's your view?
Yeah, I think there's some very difficult issues that come out of the pandemic, which I think have been sort of generalized into this working from home thing. And I think it's a lot deeper than that. I think there's, I mentioned some of the topics around concerns with technology businesses and the purposes of technology businesses, because when things get tough, and I think things have been very tough for a lot of people, almost regardless if they are financially motivated. In some ways, it's much easier if you're purely financially motivated. The money actually is interesting enough of value, which can stand on its own 2 feet. But for a lot of other people who are not purely financially motivated, their world in terms of purpose, their world in terms of relationships, their world and business purpose has really been turned upside down. So I think it's a lot more than what we just described. And I think in terms of the decision-making process, the leadership have to create some sort of framework. So I think it's not that so for example, when I get involved in situations, I know there are winners and losers in most of the decisions I make. And that's the life of a leader, managing, the difficult decisions and the consequences. But that's not to say you can't adopt a consultative approach, because the way you get around that is to actually make the decision-making process clear. So I'd say, look, I'm going to adopt a consult and decide. So I'm going to listen to what everybody says, okay, but then I'm going to decide what to do. And that actually gets around the issue of resolving conflict and winners and losers, because as long as the process has been seen to be fair, you can get away with that, as long as you handle yourself properly. A consultative approach, which I think is the one that David was talking about, leads to warfare, and I think it drives a lot of the big issues underground. So that I talked about around purpose in the business and the rest of it, which goes a lot further than where we're working and working together. Although relationships are absolutely critical, because empathy and our relationships are absolutely critical to our well-being. They're critical to our profit. So I think and I think this actually rather suggests to me as well, we've been measuring the wrong things in companies for a long time. A lot of finance, and I've realised this. I mean, I run unbelievably sophisticated balanced scorecards in complex businesses. We're measuring everything, and actually, to be honest, I think that's a lot of it's a load of nonsense. And I think there's always been lead and lag indicators. I think the greatest lead indicator we have at the moment is relationships, Nick. Relationships, from which everything else is built up. And I think a lot of the rest of this stuff, we found ourselves talking about stuff that really doesn't matter to us as human beings. And I think there's been a major reset we've got to acknowledge and take on the chin as leaders to say, look, we've really badly screwed up. We've screwed up the planet. The way we've been running businesses, what we've been measuring is wrong. And yet my concern is actually we're accelerating often, quite dramatically the wrong directions, which technology is really questionable when it comes to relationships. I mean, it's interesting, us three have got to know each other really quite well on Zoom, which I think is great, but I still think we need to have a coffee or a curry, and I think relationships are absolutely critical to this whole process. So I think, don't underestimate the challenge, but for sure, a pure consultative approach is a great way to start a war or drive a lot underground, Nick. So one of the things I'm passionate about is people speaking up if they're concerned. And a consult and decide process at least creates that framework from which you can build upon. So I think it's the subtlety of that. I've got that really badly wrong in the past, by the way. I can really tell you some interesting war stories about how I've created really big problems, but very successful results as a consequence of not getting that right. So it's a subtle thing around consult and decide versus the purely consultative process.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember which one of you said this, but I think spending time on framing the questions as well, like really thinking through what's the questions I'm going to ask these team here if I'm going to go to a survey, and what's as you said, Tom, here's the defined process and outcome, which will be led by the leader saying, how did you phrase it? Was it
Consultants.
Consultant aside? Yeah, it's consultant aside. I think that's good. Just making sure you've got a clear narrative and like, these are the questions, these are my reasons for it, this is what we need to do, and then maybe phase it in. I think you should get to a place you want to be. And also, hopefully, we all work with people who can understand that if Jimmy or Sally really is petrified of coming to an office with 30, 40 people in it because what's going on, that flexibility, that hopefully you've got teams around you who can get the fact, like, let's try and support them through that and get them in. So if that means that they come into the office on a different day to be with some of their teammates, just so they can sort of interact and slowly get used to that sort of new world, great. Right, but I think part of that process is maybe getting the hearts and minds of the people who have a very high fairness gauge, who want that world, that binary world of like, we all do this, or it's not fair, or like, just because they're doing it, why can't X do it? And you're like, well, because they're different, right? Because they're different. It's a different journey. End of the day, hopefully the reason people are bringing people back into an office is because they truly believe the outputs and successes of their careers is going to be enhanced, right? So, if anything, the person who's, nervous to come back into the office, in a way, they're at a disadvantage in a way, if the leadership believes, like, because they're not being in this surrounding, it's not helping them progress as quickly as they want to or achieve the results they want to. So they'll be worried and nervous about that anyway, unless you're running a business where the people at home really are doing a better job. Then you've got to question, what are you doing with those days that people are in the office? Where is the real value? Where is the real community? Is it just same as work they're doing all the time, or is there something that's actually bringing people together, some real strategy sessions, whatever it might be? David, just a closing thought for you on like people sort of struggling with this, and a few maybe tips you think people should sort of take on.
Yeah, I think it just speaks into what you've been saying, Nick, which is, what's the end outcome that you're trying to achieve? Because I think people will adapt to the situations we put ourselves under. That's a part of being a human being. And I think as we come out of this pandemic period, hopefully, that then is, what do you want your company, or what do you feel is the best place for you and the company, the team, to serve customers, to grow a really good business? It might be that you can go, well, actually, we could employ more people by not being in an office, work remotely, everyone can have better work-life balance, we're more productive, we can take Friday afternoons off, so everyone can have much better mental health, whatever it is, totally fine. Whatever is in line with your outcomes, it should be what's driving it, as opposed to the subjective feelings of everybody. And I think don't then be afraid that if people leave, or if it's not the right place, and if you decide that someone decides that we're just going to be working remotely, and someone goes, but I really want to be in an office, then that might not be the best place for them, because you can't shape what you're doing around one or two people, and that's okay. And it's better that they're somewhere where they're really happy, and it's better that you get someone else in who's going to be really happy in that role. That's better for everybody, and it's better for the wider environment and everybody. So I think that's just the probably really clear thing, is don't be afraid to, during this period of change, that things, personnel might change, and that might be okay if it's for the right reasons, and that's in line with what you're trying to do, and that might be the best thing for everybody. So I think have clarity and be bold would be my tips.
Perfect. Well, thanks, guys. I think I thought we were going to sort of cover numerous topics, but actually that one deserves some airtime alone, because I do think that is what so many people are struggling with right now, and sort of trying to get right. And it's a hard one to actually get right, I think, for people at the moment. Thank you for everyone who's been sort of writing in with their questions. Keep them coming. If you've got some more, put them down in either wherever you can see it, either in the chat box or whatever medium you're watching this on. Write into us. Doesn't matter. We'd love to hear from you. We are going to be doing a few group sessions, maybe a couple of lives, depending on the topics and the feedback from yourselves. Otherwise, thanks for all the support, and we look forward to answering all your questions very soon. All the best.